What happens when two of the world's biggest powers go head-to-head, not with bombs or bullets, but with tariffs and trade bans? Factories shut down, prices skyrocket, and the global economy shakes. But here's the twist. The real impact of the U.S. China trade war isn't what you think. In the next few minutes, you'll uncover the hidden consequences and why this economic battle could reshape the future of the world as we know it. Don't blink. For years, the United States watched as China rose from a low-cost manufacturing hub to a global economic powerhouse. American companies outsourced labor. China built massive trade surpluses, and the U.S. trade deficit ballooned. Behind the scenes, concerns grew. Intellectual property theft, state subsidies, and unfair trade practices. It wasn't just about economics. It was about dominance in a new global order. In 2018, the tension finally exploded. President Donald Trump launched a trade offensive, imposing tariffs on over $250 billion worth of Chinese goods. His administration argued that China had manipulated the system for too long, and it was time to rebalance the scales. Beijing hit back with its own set of tariffs, targeting American agriculture, automobiles, and energy. What started as a negotiation quickly turned into economic warfare. The goal was simple on paper: bring manufacturing back to America, punish Chinese unfairness, and force Beijing to play by global rules. But global supply chains weren't ready for that kind of shock. U.S. companies began to suffer, Chinese exporters scrambled, and third-party countries were pulled into the storm. This wasn't just bilateral tension. It was the start of a global reckoning. Beneath the headlines, a deeper reality was taking shape. The U.S. wasn't just trying to correct a trade imbalance, it was trying to halt China's rise before it became unstoppable. And for China, this wasn't just about goods and tariffs. It was a test of sovereignty, resilience, and survival. The trade war became a symbolic fight for the future of economic leadership. At first glance, the U.S. appeared to be in control. It was the world's largest economy, wielding the dollar as a global weapon. But the effects of the trade war quickly hit home. American farmers, once proud exporters to China, saw their markets vanish overnight. Soybeans, pork, and corn rotted in silos, and rural communities begged for government aid. Washington responded with over $28 billion in bailouts, a silent admission that the cost was already too high. Small and mid-sized manufacturers faced a brutal reality. The tariffs raised the price of imported parts and raw materials, squeezing their profit margins. Many couldn't compete with larger corporations that had supply chains in place. For them, America First felt more like small business last. Layoffs increased, investment slowed, and uncertainty haunted the business sector. Meanwhile, American consumers, the very people the trade war aimed to protect, found themselves paying more. Everyday products like electronics, washing machines, and even clothing became more expensive. Inflation crept in, not from wages or demand, but from geopolitical chess moves. The average household felt it in their wallets, whether they realized it or not. Politically, the trade war became a dividing line. Some praised it as a necessary stand against Chinese aggression, while others saw it as economic self-sabotage. But beyond the headlines and political sound bites, the reality was clear. The trade war didn't bring back millions of jobs. It revealed just how deeply interwoven the U.S. had become with the very country it was trying to punish. For China, the trade war was a wake-up call. For decades, its rapid growth was powered by exports, especially to the U.S. When the tariffs hit, thousands of factories, particularly in southern China, faced order cancellations, delays, and closures. The textile, electronics, and machinery sectors, once the pride of China's manufacturing empire, saw massive layoffs and declining profit margins. But the Chinese government didn't sit still. Beijing responded with stimulus packages, tax cuts, and investments in domestic industries. It doubled down on its long-term strategy, Made in China 2025. This initiative aimed to make China self-sufficient in key sectors like semiconductors, aerospace, biotech, and artificial intelligence. The goal was simple: never again be vulnerable to foreign economic pressure. The trade war also forced China to diversify its global partnerships. It accelerated trade deals with the European Union, Latin America, and Africa. While the US was building walls, China was building bridges. Through massive infrastructure and investment programs like the Belt and Road Initiative, the message was clear: if America closes the door, China will open 10 more. However, the damage wasn't just economic, it was psychological. Chinese policymakers realized the US was no longer a partner, but a strategic rival. Public sentiment hardened, nationalism grew, and the belief that the West would never accept a rising China became stronger. The trade war didn't just hurt China's economy, it changed its worldview. The U.S. China trade war sent shockwaves far beyond Washington and Beijing. Countries that depended on stable global trade suddenly found themselves in chaos. European car manufacturers, Southeast Asian electronics firms, and Latin American farmers all felt the impact. Global markets became volatile, and companies around the world were forced to rethink where and how they operated. Some nations, however, saw opportunity in the chaos. Vietnam, Mexico, and India emerged as unexpected winners. As U.S. companies looked to avoid tariffs, they relocated factories and supply chains to these more neutral countries. Vietnam's exports to the U.S. soared, and foreign investment in Southeast Asia spiked. But this boom came with its own challenges: strained infrastructure, rising labor costs, and political instability. The trade war also exposed the fragility of globalization. For decades, the world relied on just-in-time manufacturing and tightly connected supply networks. The sudden disruption showed how vulnerable that system really was. Shortages, delays, and price hikes became the new normal. The pandemic later amplified this, but the trade war started the unraveling. In the end, no country was truly isolated from the fallout. Whether you were buying a smartphone in Berlin, exporting wine from Chile, or building cars in Canada, the ripple effects reached you. The US-China trade war didn't just redraw economic maps. It rewired how the world thinks about trade, trust, and resilience. When the dust began to settle, both sides claimed victory, but the numbers told a different story. The US collected billions in tariffs, but most of the cost was passed on to American companies and consumers. China's exports took a hit, but it adapted faster than many expected. Economically, both countries lost in growth, stability, and global confidence. Yet beneath the surface, both nations gained something more strategic. The US exposed vulnerabilities in China's trade practices and began pushing allies to decouple from Chinese tech and infrastructure. Washington realized that future wars wouldn't be fought only with weapons, but with chips, data, and control over supply chains. Meanwhile, China accelerated its march toward economic independence. The trade war forced Beijing to invest in domestic innovation and deepen ties with the global South. Instead of relying on American demand, China began building parallel systems, payment networks, trade agreements, and digital platforms that bypassed the West entirely. So, who really won? Maybe neither, or maybe both in different ways. But one thing is clear: the world is no longer as interconnected, naive, or dependent as it was before the first tariff was imposed. The US-China trade war didn't end globalization. It reshaped it for a new era of competition, caution, and strategic calculation. This wasn't just a trade war. It was a turning point in global history. A silent revolution that exposed weaknesses, redrew alliances, and set the stage for future conflicts. As the US and China continue to clash in economics, tech, and influence, the rest of the world is forced to adapt or be left behind. If you want to keep up with the power shifts shaping our future, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who still thinks this was just about tariffs